Alary stared out of the shuttle window, her large, dark eyes taking in the new world outside. She had never seen anything like it. The human planet was bustling with life. The tall buildings, the endless streets filled with people, and the way their skies stretched so far beyond what she was used to. It was all so different. She had come to this place as part of a cultural exchange program, and it was meant to be a chance to study the humans, their way of life, their technology, and their strange emotions. But there was one thing that Alary didn't quite understand yet: their way of reproduction. The idea seemed messy, complicated, and inefficient. Alary was from the Telvorian species, a highly intelligent race from a distant planet. The Telvorians had perfected their way of living long ago, and one thing they had perfected was reproduction. It was a simple process. Telvorians didn't need the messiness of physical connection between two beings. Instead, they reproduced asexually, creating new life through a process involving genetic synthesis and crystalline incubators. There was no pain, no struggle, no emotional attachment. Everything was orderly and controlled. This is how life continued on their planet. But the humans, Alary had heard rumors about how they reproduced, and the details didn't make sense to her. When she arrived at the Reynard family's home, she was introduced to Emily and Daniel, the human couple who would be hosting her during her time on Earth. Emily was pregnant, and Alary had been told that she would be able to study human birth practices firsthand. However, nothing had prepared her for the sight of Emily's growing belly, or the way Daniel looked at her with such excitement and affection. It all seemed so strange. "Alary, this is our home," Emily said warmly as they stepped inside. The air smelled like flowers and freshly baked bread. Everything felt different. But Alary was here to observe, not to be distracted by the scents and sounds of human life. "Thank you," Alary responded politely, her voice smooth and emotionless. Emily smiled. "We're happy to have you stay with us." Alary was curious, but there was one question that kept bothering her. How could humans possibly reproduce so often? She'd heard about the way humans needed to connect physically to create new life. She had read the data, but the concept still seemed strange to her. Why would they do something like that? Surely there was a more efficient way. The next day, Alary sat down with Emily for a conversation. She had learned from her research that humans experienced a long and painful process to bring new life into the world, but she didn't understand why they continued to do it. She had to know more. "Emily," Alary began, her tone soft but direct, "I have been studying human reproduction, but I still don't understand. Why do you go through such a complicated and painful process?" Emily blinked, surprised by the question. "Well," she said slowly, "it's just part of being human. Reproduction is how we create new life. It's natural for us. But why do you experience pain?" Alary pressed. "Why must you suffer?" Emily hesitated, her hand resting on her round belly. "It's not just about the pain, Alary. It's about bringing new life into the world. It's something we do because we love each other, and we want to share that love with a new generation." Alary frowned. "But why so much pain? Why not simply create life in a way that's easier?" Emily smiled gently. "You'll understand one day. It's not just the result that matters. It's the journey, the experience. It's the connection we feel with each other, with the child, and with life itself." Alary didn't understand. The idea of human reproduction still seemed completely illogical to her. The process was long, painful, and full of risks, and humans went through it over and over again. But she couldn't help feeling a strange curiosity. Could there really be more to this than just the biological process? As Alary thought about it, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was missing from her understanding. She had studied humans for years, and yet there was something about them she had not yet grasped. The emotional bond between them, the way they cared for one another, was foreign to her. It wasn't something she could calculate or understand with her Telvorian logic. Emily's words stayed with her. "It's the journey that matters. Perhaps this was a piece of the puzzle she was missing. But it would take time for Ellery to truly understand why humans did the things they did, especially when it came to something as mysterious as reproduction. That night, as Ellery lay in her bed, she thought about all she had learned so far. Her mission here was to understand humans, but so far, their way of life was far more complicated than anything she had imagined, and it was only the beginning. Tomorrow, she would accompany Emily to the doctor's office for a prenatal checkup. Ellery hoped that it would offer some answers to questions that had been troubling her since her arrival. But deep down, she knew that understanding the human way of reproduction would not be as simple as reading a data file. It was going to take more than logic. The following morning, Ellery accompanied Emily to the medical clinic. The human building was large and busy, with white walls and strange machines that hummed and beeped. Ellery took note of everything around her, keen to observe the humans' behavior and their advanced medical technology. She had heard about the human process of childbirth, but now she would see it firsthand. And this time, she was determined to understand it. As they entered the waiting room, Emily greeted the receptionist with a friendly smile. Ellery noticed how comfortable and natural Emily seemed, like she was in her own home. Humans, she thought, were far more social than the Telvorians. While the Telvorians lived in quiet, isolated communities, humans seemed to thrive on interaction and connection. Emily was called in shortly, and Ellery followed her into the examination room. The room smelled of antiseptic and had various medical tools neatly arranged on shelves. Ellery's eyes quickly moved over the machines that stood in the corner. One in particular caught her attention, a large device with a screen. She had seen something like it in her research, but this one seemed much more advanced. As Emily lay down on the examination table, Ellery stood nearby, her arms folded as she watched closely. The doctor, a kind-faced woman with short brown hair, entered the room and greeted Emily with a warm smile. Ellery noticed the doctor's easygoing demeanor, which seemed so different from her own species' approach to such serious matters. Telvorian doctors never showed emotion. Their work was all about precision and logic. "Good morning, Emily," the doctor said. "How are you feeling today?" "I'm doing well, thank you," Emily replied, her voice calm and cheerful. Ellery studied their interaction closely. She couldn't understand why humans treated each other with such warmth in a place like this. She was used to cold, efficient exchanges. Her own people had no need for pleasantries when they came to see a doctor. But here, it felt like more than just a routine visit. The doctor began to explain some of the steps of the prenatal checkup to Emily, using words that Ellery didn't fully understand. The doctor pointed to the machine in the corner, the one with the screen, and turned it on. A soft whirring noise filled the room, and the screen lit up. The doctor applied a cold gel to Emily's belly, and a small device was placed gently on her skin. "What is that?" Ellery asked, her voice laced with curiosity. "This is an ultrasound," the doctor explained, looking up at Ellery. "It allows us to see the baby inside. We can check its growth, the heartbeat, and see if everything is going well." Ellery's eyes widened in fascination. She had heard of the technology, but seeing it in action was something entirely new. The screen showed an image of a small, fuzzy shape. It looked like a tiny person moving inside Emily's body. Ellery leaned closer, her gaze fixed on the image. The doctor pointed to the screen. "There's the baby's heartbeat. Can you hear it?" She turned up the volume, and a rhythmic thumping filled the room. It was a sound Ellery had never heard before. She studied the screen, her mind trying to process what she was seeing. Emily smiled as she looked at the screen. "It's amazing, isn't it?" Ellery wasn't sure what to make of the scene. The connection between Emily and her unborn child seemed so deep, so personal. Ellery had always been taught that emotions were unnecessary distractions from the truth. But as she watched Emily's face light up with joy, she began to question that belief. The humans seemed to have a different kind of connection to life, one that didn't rely on logic or efficiency. The doctor continued the examination, asking Emily questions about her health and well-being. Larry listened attentively, absorbing every detail. She had learned that humans took great care during their pregnancies, constantly monitoring both the mother's and the baby's health. But it wasn't just about checking for problems. There was a certain tenderness in the way they cared for each other, something Larry couldn't quite grasp. Once the examination was over, Emily wiped off the gel from her belly and sat up. Larry helped her gather her things, still processing what she had just witnessed. As they left the room, Emily turned to Larry with a thoughtful look. "So, what do you think?" Emily asked. "Is it different from what you expected?" Larry thought for a moment, her mind racing with questions. "It's complicated. I never imagined that something so messy could be so connected. The baby, it's growing inside you. And the way the heartbeat sounds, it's unlike anything I've ever heard." Emily smiled gently. "It's a beautiful thing, Larry. It's not always easy, but it's worth it. The process, the pain, it all leads to something incredible." Larry felt a strange feeling in her chest. She wasn't sure if it was warmth or confusion, but it was something that made her want to understand more. Could it be true? Could there really be value in the difficulty of the process? She wasn't sure, but one thing was clear. Humans had a way of making something so painful feel beautiful. She wasn't quite ready to accept it, but she was beginning to see why they did it. As they left the clinic, Larry's mind was filled with new thoughts. She had learned so much today, yet she knew there was still more to discover. What other mysteries did humans hide behind their emotions and complex biology? Larry was determined to find out. A few days after the clinic visit, Larry's thoughts were still spinning. The image of the baby on the ultrasound screen had stayed with her, as had the sound of its heartbeat. She had never seen anything like it. But there was one thing that kept bothering her: pain. The idea of human pain during childbirth was something Larry could not shake from her mind. She had been taught that pain was unnecessary. For the Telvorians, pain had no place in their orderly, efficient way of life. If reproduction was necessary, it should be painless and smooth, a simple process devoid of suffering. The idea of enduring such an experience, of allowing something to hurt them so much, seemed illogical. Larry had never really understood why humans subjected themselves to such suffering. She had read about it in her studies, of course, but reading wasn't the same as seeing it or feeling it firsthand. And after hearing Emily talk about it during their visit to the clinic, Larry realized that childbirth was far more complicated than she had initially thought. The pain wasn't just physical, it was emotional too. One evening, Emily invited Larry to join her and Daniel at a local community class. It was a class designed to prepare expectant parents for the difficult but beautiful journey of childbirth. Larry hesitated. She wasn't sure what more she could learn about the process, but she agreed to go anyway. She needed to understand why humans were willing to go through such an ordeal repeatedly. The class was held in a small, bright room, filled with parents-to-be, sitting in rows of folding chairs. There were images on the wall, showing the stages of pregnancy and videos of the birth process. Larry felt a little out of place, but she remained quiet, watching with curiosity. As the instructor began, she started to explain what would happen during labor. She spoke in calm, reassuring tones, but Larry could hear the words that made her uneasy: contractions, pain, complications. She felt a chill run through her. Why would anyone willingly put themselves through such a thing? The instructor continued, showing a video of a woman giving birth. The room fell silent as everyone watched the screen. The woman in the video was in clear pain, her body trembling with each contraction. Larry watched closely, trying to understand, but her mind couldn't grasp the logic behind what she was seeing. The woman's face contorted, and her breathing grew shallow. The other parents in the room were nodding, some even smiling, as if this experience was a shared understanding. But Larry only saw the suffering. She turned to Emily, who was sitting beside her, and asked quietly, "Why do you do this? Why go through so much pain to bring new life into the world? Emily looked at Alari, her face calm but thoughtful. It's not just about the pain, Alari, she said softly. The pain is a part of it, but it's not the whole story. You see, when you bring a new life into the world, it's not just a physical act. It's an emotional one too. The pain brings us closer to the experience, to the understanding of what it means to create life. And when it's over, when you hold that baby in your arms, the pain fades, and what's left is something beautiful, something worth all of it. Alari didn't fully understand. To her, it seemed so backward. Why would anyone choose to go through so much suffering when there could be an easier way? But looking around the room, she saw the other parents nodding, their faces soft with understanding, and she wondered if there was more to this than she realized. After the class ended, Alari stayed behind, watching the expectant parents talk to each other. Their faces were calm, and they seemed to have a deep understanding of what was to come. It was strange to Alari. The Telvorians didn't speak about reproduction the way these humans did. There was no emotion involved, no discussion about the hardships. It was simply a scientific process. But here, in this room full of humans, reproduction was something much deeper, something full of connection and sacrifice. Emily, Alari began, her voice thoughtful. I think I understand a little bit more now, but I still don't understand the pain. Why does it have to hurt so much? Emily looked at her with a smile. It's a part of being human, Alari. The pain isn't just something to endure. It's something that teaches us. It teaches us patience, strength, and resilience. And in the end, when we hold our babies in our arms, we realize that it was all worth it. The pain, the struggle, it all becomes part of our story, part of the love we have for our children. Alari was silent for a long time, her mind racing with conflicting thoughts. She still couldn't understand the logic behind the pain, but there was something in Emily's words that made her feel a flicker of understanding. Maybe it wasn't about the pain at all. Maybe it was about something deeper, something that couldn't be understood through logic alone. Maybe it was about love. As Alari walked back to the Reynard home that evening, she couldn't stop thinking about what Emily had said. The pain, the suffering, it all seemed so unnecessary to her, and yet there was a bond between humans that she couldn't quite explain. It was something raw, something real, something that transcended logic. Could it be that love, in all its complexity and emotion, was more important than logic? Alari wasn't sure, but she knew one thing. She was starting to see humans in a new light. A few weeks later, Emily's due date arrived. The days had passed quickly, and Alari found herself thinking more and more about the human process of childbirth. She had come to the conclusion that there was something profound about it, something beyond what her logical mind could fully understand. She had spent days reflecting on what Emily had told her, about the pain, the love, and the strength involved. Yet, despite all her observations, Alari had never witnessed the actual birth. She wasn't sure what to expect, but something inside her made her feel that this moment would change everything. That morning, Emily woke up feeling a little different. Her water had broken, and the baby was coming. Emily called Daniel, who rushed to her side, and they immediately made plans to go to the hospital. Alari, who had been staying with them for weeks now, felt an odd sense of anticipation. She had been curious about childbirth, but now it felt real, much closer than it had ever been. Emily's calm demeanor reassured Alari, but Alari still couldn't shake her nervousness. As they rushed to the car, Alari couldn't help but notice how composed Emily seemed. "Aren't you worried?" Alari asked, her voice filled with uncertainty. Emily gave her a gentle smile. "I've been preparing for this moment for months. It's a big change, but it's also a beautiful one. I'm ready." The drive to the hospital was quiet, except for the occasional sounds of Emily breathing through mild contractions. Alari had read about these contractions, how they help the body prepare for labor, but seeing Emily experience them firsthand was unsettling. Alari had seen her calm and composed, but now there was a subtle tension in the air. It was as if the world was holding its breath, waiting for the moment of transformation. When they arrived at the hospital, the staff was already prepared. Nurses and doctors moved quickly but efficiently, guiding Emily into a delivery room. Alary stood just outside the room, unsure of what to do, but feeling an undeniable pull to stay close. She was determined to witness this event, even though part of her wanted to run away from the intensity of it all. Emily's face tightened with pain as the contractions grew stronger. Alary watched as Daniel held Emily's hand, whispering words of encouragement. The love between them was undeniable. It was clear to Alary that the emotional connection between the two humans was not just about the physical act of reproduction, but about something much deeper, something that transcended the pain they were both enduring. The room was filled with the sound of Emily's breathing, steady and strong. Alary felt a strange sense of awe. This was no longer about the process. It was about the experience. This was what Emily had been talking about when she spoke of love, patience, and strength. The pain, the struggle, all of it was part of the journey. Emily's determination to bring new life into the world was like nothing Alary had ever seen. She had never understood how something so painful could be so beautiful, but now she was starting to see it with her own eyes. Hours passed. The pain seemed endless, but Emily's strength never wavered. Her face showed signs of exhaustion, but there was also a deep sense of focus. She was doing something she had prepared for her entire life. It wasn't easy, but it was worth it. Every moment of pain brought her closer to the goal, to meet the new life she had carried within her for so many months. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Emily gave one last, powerful push. The room fell silent for a brief moment. And then, the sound of a baby's cry filled the air. Alary's heart raced as she watched the nurse gently place the newborn baby into Emily's arms. The moment was overwhelming. The baby's tiny hands and feet, its face wrinkled and scrunched, were perfect in their own way. Emily looked down at her baby with tears in her eyes, her exhaustion replaced by pure joy. Daniel kissed her forehead and looked at the baby with amazement. Alary couldn't help but feel moved by the sight. The pain, the struggle, it had led to this. The newborn was fragile, but it was full of life. The room seemed to glow with the energy of this new beginning. Alary stood there, her thoughts spinning, her mind racing to comprehend the experience she had just witnessed. She had never felt anything like it before. "This is beautiful," Alary said softly, almost to herself. Emily looked up at her, her face glowing with happiness. "It is. This is the moment that makes everything worth it." Alary wasn't sure what to say. She had witnessed something powerful, something that went beyond biology, beyond logic. This wasn't just about reproducing. This was about creating life, about the deep bond between parent and child. It was about love, about the strength to endure, and the joy of holding something so fragile, so precious. As Emily held the baby in her arms, Alary realized that she had just learned something about humans that she had never understood before. The pain, the struggle, it wasn't just about the end result. It was about the journey, the emotional bond, and the connection that was created along the way. Alary stepped closer, her eyes never leaving the baby in Emily's arms. She didn't fully understand it all, but she was beginning to see the beauty in the process. She was beginning to understand why humans did what they did, why they embraced the pain and the struggle. In that moment, Alary knew that she would never look at human reproduction the same way again. In the days following the birth, Alary found herself lost in thought. She had witnessed something truly extraordinary, the birth of a human child. But what surprised her the most was not the baby's arrival or the pain Emily had endured, but the deep, unspoken connection between the new parents. The love that radiated between Emily, Daniel, and their child seemed to fill the room, changing everything around them. Alary couldn't help but wonder, what was this love? It was unlike anything she had ever known. The Telvorians didn't have bonds like this. Their relationships were based on logic and shared purpose, not on emotions or feelings. Yet, after seeing the way Emily and Daniel interacted with their newborn, Larry couldn't deny that this connection was real, powerful, and beautiful. Over the next few days, Larry spent a lot of time observing the family. Emily and Daniel hardly ever left the baby's side. Their every movement seemed to revolve around the tiny human they had brought into the world. Larry watched as they gently cradled the baby, feeding, soothing, and caring for it. There was tenderness in their touch, a level of care that Larry had never seen before. The parents would smile at the baby as if they were seeing the most precious thing in the universe. Larry couldn't help but feel a bit out of place. She was a visitor in this strange new world of human connections, and she wasn't sure how she fit into it. She wasn't a parent, nor was she even human. She was an outsider, trying to understand something so fundamentally different from everything she had known. One evening, Emily and Daniel invited Larry to sit with them while they took a break from caring for the baby. They sat on the couch, the baby nestled peacefully in a crib nearby. The room was quiet except for the soft hum of the house and the occasional sounds of the baby's breathing. "Larry," Emily said gently, "I know you've been observing us for a while now. I can see you're curious about how all of this works. It's okay to ask questions. You don't have to understand everything right away." Larry nodded but hesitated before speaking. "I don't understand," she said softly. "I don't understand the way you two love the baby. I've seen love among my people, but this is different. It feels like more than just affection. It's as if you are connected to this little one in a way that goes beyond anything I've experienced." Emily smiled, her eyes soft with understanding. "It's a bond that forms naturally when you bring a new life into the world," she explained. "The moment you hold your child for the first time, something changes in you. You become part of something greater. It's not just about your connection to the child. It's about how that child changes you, how it transforms everything you thought you knew about love and purpose." Larry listened closely, trying to make sense of Emily's words. "But why does it have to hurt so much? Why does the process have to be so painful?" Daniel, who had been quietly listening, spoke up. "The pain is part of it because it makes us realize just how precious the new life is. We endure it, not just for ourselves, but for the child we're bringing into the world. And once the pain is over, the joy is so much greater. It's hard to explain. It's something you feel, not something you can put into words." Larry sat in silence, trying to comprehend. She had never considered that the pain could be part of the process, part of the journey. To her, pain was always something to be avoided, something unnecessary. But humans seemed to embrace it, knowing that something even greater would come from it. The next morning, Larry stood by the window, looking out at the bright sky. She had always thought of herself as a being who valued logic and clarity, someone who sought the simplest solutions. But now, after seeing the depth of human emotion, she began to realize that there was more to life than logic alone. She wasn't sure she fully understood it yet, but she was beginning to see the value of feelings, of connections, of love. She turned back to see Emily cradling the baby in her arms. It was a quiet moment, the kind that spoke volumes without saying a word. Emily gently rocked the baby, and Daniel sat beside her, his hand resting on her shoulder. Larry watched them, feeling something stir within her, something unfamiliar, but undeniably real. "Do you ever wonder what life would be like without the pain?" Larry asked suddenly, her voice filled with curiosity. Emily paused, considering the question. "I suppose we could have a life without pain, but it wouldn't be the same," she said thoughtfully. "Pain is part of what makes us human. It makes us stronger. And it gives us the ability to appreciate the good times even more. If we didn't experience hardship, how would we ever recognize the moments of joy and love?" Larry looked at Emily and Daniel, her heart full of questions. The answers she had been searching for weren't as simple as she had hoped. They were more complicated, more layered, and they made her question everything she had known. But one thing was clear: the love humans shared, the connections they formed, were far more intricate and powerful than she had ever imagined. And though she might not fully understand it yet, Alary knew one thing for certain. She wanted to learn more. As the day went on, Alary found herself feeling a strange sense of peace. She wasn't sure what her place was in this world of emotions and bonds, but she felt like she was beginning to understand. Maybe there was more to life than logic and order. Maybe, just maybe, love was the answer. Days passed, and Alary found herself slowly becoming a part of the family's routine. She spent more time with Emily and Daniel, helping out when she could, and observing the small, tender moments that filled their lives with meaning. She had never seen anything like it. The way Emily and Daniel cared for their baby, the way they spoke to her, smiled at her, and even just looked at her as if she was the most precious thing in the world. This was something Alary hadn't expected. She had known of human emotions, of course, but she had never seen them in action like this. It was as if Emily and Daniel were not just parents to a child, but were connected to her in a deeper way. It made Alary curious. She had seen love before, but it was always the kind that came from duty or affection. Never this all-encompassing, quiet devotion. One afternoon, as Alary was sitting quietly in the living room, Emily entered with the baby in her arms. The small child had just woken up from a nap, her eyes wide and curious, her tiny hands reaching out into the air. Emily smiled down at her, her expression one of complete adoration. Alary watched in silence, unable to look away. There was something incredibly moving about the way Emily held the baby. It wasn't just care, it was something more, something that went beyond the surface. "Do you ever stop to think about how different things would be without her?" Alary asked, her voice quiet but full of curiosity. Emily looked at her, her eyes soft with affection. "Every day. It's hard to imagine life without her. Before she was born, I couldn't fully grasp how much she would change everything. But now it feels like she's always been a part of us." Alary nodded slowly, processing Emily's words. She had heard of the connection that humans often spoke of between parents and children, but hearing it from Emily made it feel more real, more tangible. The bond between them was undeniable. Daniel joined them a few moments later, a cup of tea in his hand. He smiled at the sight of Emily and the baby, sitting on the couch, surrounded by warmth. Alary noticed how effortlessly they worked together. It was as though they had become a unit, a team that functioned not just for themselves, but for the child they had brought into the world. There was no separation, no division. It was as if they were all one. "How are you both feeling today?" Alary asked, wanting to understand more about their experience. "We're doing well," Daniel replied, taking the seat beside Emily. "It's a lot of work, but the love we feel for her makes it worth every moment." Emily nodded in agreement. "I think what has surprised me the most is how much we're learning. Every day feels like a new lesson. There's something about becoming a parent that teaches you in ways nothing else ever could." Alary thought about this for a moment. She had always considered herself a learner, someone who sought knowledge and wisdom from observation. Yet, what she was witnessing now was a different kind of learning. It wasn't about facts or logic. It was about feelings, about growth and change that came from within. She wondered what it would be like to experience that kind of growth herself, to feel that deep, unspoken bond with another being. Her thoughts were interrupted when the baby, still in Emily's arms, giggled softly. The sound was high-pitched and pure, filled with innocence and joy. Alary couldn't help but smile. There was something so innocent about the way the baby interacted with the world. She was exploring everything with wide eyes, finding joy in the smallest things. Alary realized that there was a beauty in that innocence, a kind of purity that humans were capable of. "It's amazing," Alary said quietly, "the way she looks at everything with such wonder. It's as if she's seeing the world for the first time, every time." Emily laughed softly. "Yes, that's the magic of being a parent. You get to experience the world through your child's eyes. You begin to see things in a whole new light. Even the smallest things become special." Alary sat back, deep in thought. She had always viewed the universe as a series of facts and explanations, But now she was beginning to see how much of it was shaped by perspective, by how one experienced it, how one felt about it. The baby, with her innocent eyes and constant curiosity, was reminding Alari of a truth she had never considered before, that sometimes it wasn't about understanding everything logically. Sometimes it was enough to simply experience and feel. Later that evening, as the sun began to set, Alari sat by the window, watching the colors of the sky change. She had spent so much time trying to understand humans through logic, through facts, but now she saw that there was something more to them. Something deeper. It was love. It was the unspoken bond between parent and child. It was the way humans were able to see the world anew through the eyes of their children. It was about the small moments, the giggles, the smiles, the quiet tenderness that made life beautiful, even in the most ordinary of times. As Alari watched Emily and Daniel with their baby, she felt a warmth in her chest. It was a strange feeling, one that she couldn't explain fully, but it was there. She didn't need to understand it all to know that something had changed within her. She was beginning to understand the power of human connection, and it was far greater than she had ever imagined. The days continued to pass, and Alari's understanding of human life deepened. She had witnessed birth, observed the powerful bond between parents and children, and learned the importance of love and connection. But now, as she stood by the window one evening, watching the sky change colors as night began to fall, she felt a sense of completion. There was still so much to learn, but she had seen enough to know that humans were not just biological creatures. They were emotional beings, capable of profound connections and experiences that could not be measured by logic alone. Her thoughts were interrupted when she heard soft footsteps behind her. Turning, she saw Emily approaching, the baby in her arms, wrapped snugly in a soft blanket. Emily's face was calm, but there was a tiredness in her eyes. Parenting, Alari knew, was exhausting work. But despite the challenges, Emily and Daniel had handled everything with patience and love. Alari admired their strength. "Hi, Alari." Emily greeted her with a warm smile. "How are you feeling today?" Alari had grown accustomed to this question. Emily asked it often, and every time. It made Alari realize how much Emily and Daniel truly cared for her. They weren't just focused on their own lives. They wanted to know how Alari was doing too. It was an act of kindness that Alari hadn't experienced before, and it filled her with a sense of gratitude she hadn't expected. "I'm well," Alari said thoughtfully, turning to face Emily. "I've been reflecting on everything, on what I've seen, what I've learned, and I've come to realize something important." Emily raised an eyebrow, intrigued. "What is it?" "I've been trying to understand humans for a long time," Alari said slowly. "I've always looked for logic, for clear answers, for patterns. But what I've come to understand is that there's something deeper, something that can't be explained with facts or reason. It's love." Emily smiled softly, her eyes gentle. "Yes, love is something that can't be measured or understood in the same way as everything else. It's not always logical, but it's what makes life meaningful." Alari nodded, her mind racing with new thoughts. "I've seen how love works between parents and children. I've seen how the baby, your baby, brings so much joy and purpose to both of you. But I'm starting to understand that love is not just about what you feel in the moment. It's about how it changes you, how it shapes you into something more than you were before." Emily glanced down at the baby, who was now softly sleeping in her arms. Her small face was peaceful, and Alari could almost feel the quiet happiness that radiated from the family. It was a gentle reminder of the truth Alari was beginning to understand. "Love transforms us," Emily agreed quietly. "It makes us grow in ways we never thought possible. Before I had her, I didn't know how much I could love. I didn't know how much I could give of myself. But now, with her, everything is different, and I wouldn't change a thing." Alari's gaze lingered on the baby. She had been so focused on understanding the scientific aspects of life, on figuring out how everything worked. But now she realized there was something far more important than facts. There was the experience of living, of feeling, and of being part of something bigger than yourself. I think I understand now, Alari said softly. I've spent so much time trying to make sense of the universe, trying to figure out what makes everything tick. But I've learned that there's more to life than just the rules of the world. Love, emotions, connections, they can't always be explained, but they make life worth living. And that is something I will carry with me, no matter where I go. Emily smiled, her eyes bright with understanding. That's a beautiful way to put it, Alari. I'm glad you're beginning to see it. The conversation was quiet for a while as they both looked down at the baby, peacefully asleep in Emily's arms. The room was filled with a sense of calm, a quiet understanding that neither of them needed to speak out loud. Alari had come a long way since her arrival on Earth. She had seen the wonders of human life, from birth to the connections that shaped it. But now she understood something even more profound. Life wasn't just about survival or logic. It was about the moments of joy, the feelings of love, and the bonds that tied everyone together. Humans didn't just live. They thrived because of their ability to love, to connect, and to change. As the evening turned to night and the first stars appeared in the sky, Alari felt a sense of peace that she had never known before. She had come to Earth to learn, to observe, and to understand. But in the process, she had discovered something even greater, that the mysteries of the universe were not just about understanding, but about living with the heart. Looking out the window once more, Alari knew that her journey was far from over. There was still much to discover, much to learn, but she also knew that the most important lesson of all had already been revealed to her.